Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm thrilled to share with you my secrets of making my top selling lidded bowl. In today's video, I'm going to take you through the whole process from one solid block of Ambrosia Maple to this beautiful handcrafted lidded box, lidded bowl. The thing that makes this bowl a must-have in any house is the fact that you can open and close it one-handed. But sometimes you may not want a lid that's easy to come off. Well, with a simple twist, that changes. So stick around because by the end of this, you're going to understand what makes this a must-have in any home. And hopefully you get inspired to try out one of these on your own.
Subscribe now.
It all starts with one solid block of wood. Hardwoods like cherry, walnut, or maple are fantastic. Today, I'm using this gorgeous piece of figured Ambrosia Maple. First, I mount the entire block on the lathe and turn it into a perfect cylinder. After getting it round, I noticed the splits are still showing through. The good news is the splits are all in the top half to 25% of the blank. Since this is going to end up being the lid, I just simply turn the splits out. Now that I have a cylindrical blank with no splits left over, I got to start thinking a little bit ahead here. So the first thing I do is make a tenon. Typically I would make the tenon on the right side of the blank here. I'm actually going to start on the left side. It really doesn't matter too much which one you start with. I'm starting on the left because I know this part of the blank is going to be the lid, so I don't really care if it's perfectly matching a chuck, because if I make marks on this tenon, it's all going to get turned away anyway. So I'm just going to slap on a tenon on there, something I know my chuck can grab, and then we'll go from there. Now that I have my blank mounted in my Vic Mark 120 jaws, I go ahead and start working on the shape of the bowl. The reason why I'm doing it this way is just because I want to know how much of this blank is going to be dedicated for the bowl and where I'm going to make my cut for the lid. So this is just a rough shape. I'm just trying to get a good idea of what I have and what I can use and what the bowl shape is going to look like by the end. And now it's time to start thinking about the foot on the other end. Since we are going to split this in half, I already have a foot on the upper half for the lid. Now I need a foot on the lower half for the bowl. So we're going to take our time. This one is going to end up staying on the bowl, so we need to make sure that this is a proper size for our chuck so we don't leave any marks on the foot. I now know where I'm going to split the blank with the parting tool, making the bowl and the lid. This technique guarantees that the grain will match from the lid to the bowl when we're done, which does dramatically increase the value. Now you can absolutely make this out of two different pieces of wood. If you go that route for aesthetic purposes, I would recommend that a darker piece of wood be the bowl and the lighter piece of wood for the lid. You could also add a dark finial from a separate piece of wood, but I often prefer the look of one solid continuous piece. This is where the fun really begins. With the bottom half of our blank mounted on the lathe, the first job is to start refining the shape. The workhorse for this is a 5/8 inch swept back bowl gouge, and I'm starting here with a push cut, anchoring the tool against my hip and using my whole body to guide the cut. The key is to ride the bevel to get that smooth, controlled cut with a good finish on the backside. This cross-grain orientation is how you get those sweeping, dramatic patterns that make people stop in their tracks. It reveals the wood's life story. It's also the source of its durability. Think of wood grain as a bundle of straws. For a cross-grain bowl, that bundle is lying on its side, making it incredibly strong. I tell my customers this all the time. This is a bowl you can use every single day. It can be dropped, knocked around. It will hold up. I'm going for a simple, elegant, continuous curve from the rim to the foot, with the tenon we just created serving as the foot. I'll make my final finishing passes to get the surface as perfect as possible right off the tool. On this particular piece, we do have a couple knots. This one in particular shows some signs that it doesn't look incredibly stable. So just as an extra step, just to be precautious, I do fill this up with some thin CA glue, using thin to get down into the knot and really shore up that wood to make sure that it's going to stand up to the test of time here. Now, I did have some technical difficulties with my camera, so off camera here I did make a recess on the right side of the blank, and now I've got it flipped around with my 4-jaw chuck holding it inside that recess. I did this so we can get at the foot, make some fine-tuning adjustments, and get the shape exactly perfect to start the finishing process. Now this step is not always needed. I do find myself doing this 95% of the time just as, if nothing else, just as a force of habit. However, on this particular bowl it was a necessity. For whatever reason, if being the swirling grain or this blank just really was prone to tear out. No matter how cautious I was with my final cuts, I was getting some pretty gnarly tear out. So I just go back with a refiner scraper, just shore up that shape just a little bit and try to take really light cuts. You want some fine, wispy shavings coming off the tool here. The end goal is just to get that finish on the bowl as close to perfect as possible before you put sandpaper to the wood. And now we're going to start the sanding process. On this particular blank, since it was prone to tear out, I wanted to start with power sanding. I started here with a low grit of 120, and then once I felt good that I got the grains pretty much laid down where I needed to, then I would switch back to hand sanding. Now you do see I switched back to hand sanding, think it was done, stopped the lathe, take a look, and realized that I still had some spots. So I went back and did some spot sanding with the power sanding as well. Whatever it takes at the end of the day, just make sure the wood is perfectly smooth. You don't want any marks from the sandpaper. Certainly don't want any tear out. Whatever you got to do to get there, do it. Now it's time to apply the finish. For this particular piece, I was going for a shiny finish. So for that, I do have the Mylan's finish process here. That starts with the Mylan's sanding sealer. The sanding sealer, they suggest that you apply a thin layer with the lathe off. Get it applied there all the way around the blank. Make sure you get every spot covered. And then you apply it with the lathe turning with the clean spot of your towel. Now this doesn't necessarily need a strong friction or a high speed for the sanding sealer. Just want to buff it off with the clean part of the towel. Okay, fine looking finish now. Now that the outside is perfect, it's time to hollow it out. So we load it up in the 4-jaw chuck. Safety is everything. And then we get to work. I find when hollowing out a vessel that has a fairly large undercut, most of the time it's easier to just use carbide. Now I don't necessarily always like using carbide, especially on the inside of the vessel, because I get some pretty serious tear out when I do this technique. And if you're using carbide because of an undercut, it's going to be especially hard to get a scraper or a gouge in there to clean out that tear out when you're done. So it just takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort to get in there and make sure everything's cleaned up. But sometimes it's a necessity. And here's where we built its incredible usefulness. Using my bowl gouge, I create a small and precise recess just inside the rim. This is what the lid will register against. We want to make sure that it's a relatively snug fit, but definitely still allows for that easy one-handed opening. This is a massive selling point. I always tell my customers it isn't just a container, it's a tool for your kitchen. You can store salt, sugar, herbs in there, and because of the design, you can always open it with just one hand. So whether you're busy cooking on the stove or shooing a kid away from a hot stove, trying to make sure they don't get burned, one hand is free to open and close the lid. You don't have to put down whatever you're holding, just open that lid up. Another huge point here is I always make my cross grain boxes out of wet wood, out of green timber. So when you're making that lid, you definitely don't want too tight of a snug fit, because then once the wood starts moving and warping a little bit, it's going to lock up more times than not. Now, since this is a cross grain box and we are using the same piece of wood, the good news is when it warps, it's going to warp the same amount from the lid to the bowl, relatively. So that's why you want to make sure you have built in a little bit of wiggle room in there, just to make sure that the lid and the bowl don't seize up at some point down the road. So the good news is on this bowl, it was a shallow enough curve that I was able to get my bowl scraper in there. The one area that I struggled with was near the bottom. If you notice the shape of my bowl gouge, it does come to a pretty acute point on the right side. One way you can avoid that, and what I could have done on this particular instance, is make a double curve, so that way it goes all the way around, so you don't have a point that you're worried about digging into the bottom of the bowl. That's usually not a problem that I have, so I didn't feel like changing up my tool. This is the only real bowl gouge that I have. I didn't feel like changing that up just for this one particular instance, so I was just trying to be extra cautious. But that is a step that you can take if ever you feel the need. If you've made it to this point in the video, I feel pretty confident in saying you're enjoying the content so far. And if you are enjoying the content, I would greatly appreciate a like, maybe leave a comment, certainly subscribe to the channel for more content coming in the near future. Just as a friendly reminder, a like, a comment, a subscribe, they're all completely free to you. Don't cost you a single penny, but they do go a very long way in helping me out and helping me continue to make content for you and others like you. Now my little commercial for myself is over. Enjoy the rest of the video where I complete making the lidded bowl.
Nice little swirl that goes through the center. I like that grain myself. I think that looks cool. Like quarter sawn stuff. Okay, well, now you gotta make a lid.
With the bowl body shaped and finished, it's now time to make the lid from the other blank we parted off earlier. The first step here is just to get that flat surface completely flat and ready to do a little bit of shaping. I use my calipers to very carefully mark the diameter of the recess we made on the bowl earlier. And then I turn a tenon on the lid that will perfectly fit. I am stopping the lathe relatively frequently, taking the bowl on and off and testing the fit. The goal here is to get the lid to find the recess easily, but not be so snug that it takes any pressure to remove it. Can't be too tight or it defeats the entire purpose. Once the fit is perfect, I start shaping the inside of the lid. I'm looking for a pleasing curve that adds some volume to our bowl. I also need to make sure that I'm leaving a perfectly straight edge near the tenon so I can reverse this on the chuck and have a recess to grip to shape the outside.
The rest needs to come out so I don't rub the bottom part.
Now I begin to shape the top of the lid. I'm aiming for a low profile dome that complements the curve of the bowl itself. I also need to shape a small knob or a handle. This needs to be comfortable to grip, but not so large that it looks out of place. This handle is key to making the one-handed operation feel effortless. After the shaping is done, the outside of the lid gets the same finish process as the outside of the bowl.
I think what I want to do is put basically a ball on the top.
And there it is. From a boring square block of wood to a beautiful, incredibly useful, and seriously sellable piece of art. Let's do a quick recap of what makes this bowl a home run. First, it's exceptionally useful, and its design allows it to be opened single-handedly. Second, it's cross-grain, making it super durable while creating stunning patterns that make every bowl one of a kind. And third, the craftsmanship. That perfect grain match, the precise fit, the flawless sanding, and the food-safe finish creates a premium product that people feel great about having in their home. This was never just about turning techniques. It's about making deliberate choices at every single step to create something people will love and use. I really hope this breakdown was helpful and inspires you to give this project a shot. Hey, if you got some real value out of this deep dive, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And more importantly, drop a comment below and let me know what you would store in your lidded bowl. I genuinely want to know. Thanks for hanging out with me in the shop today, and we'll see you on the next one.